What's going on, adventurers? My name's Travis and welcome back to another project. Today is going to be the third part of our vintage boat restoration series. We're going to be working on patterning out all the rotten pieces we had to remove from the boat, cutting them out and getting them ready for reinstallation. If you haven't seen our other videos, I'll put a link up here and you can click over and check out our progress to date. So we're gonna take this one step at a time. I have all the pieces here for the front seat of the boat. You can see they're all rotten, all falling apart, but they can still work as a pattern to cut out new pieces from new plywood. All the structure of the seat is 3/4 inch plywood, so I bought a sheet of that. And then the top and anything that you'll see, I got some really nice sanded plywood, so we'll use that so it has a nice smooth finish. Back in the first video, I took the time to take lots of pictures of the boat before I disassembled it, as well as I was disassembling it. It's been about a month and a half since I tore this boat apart, and those photos have been really helpful just to double check, make sure I have all the pieces for the front seat to start rebuilding. So what I'm gonna do is cut a strip off here, cut it into thirds, then I can stack them and clamp them all together. So when I cut it out, I just have to do one cut and they all match. I've got my 3 pieces for the seat support cut out here and stacked all together. They're pretty thick. I was originally gonna cut them all out in one go, but I think I'm going to do a rough cut, get them mostly shaped, and then I'll clamp them all together and do the final sanding and shaping so they all match. Now that I have all 3 supports roughly cut out, I'm just gonna go over, sand some pieces down, make sure that they're all even with each other. Now it's time to cut out the backrest for the front seat. So I have this nice smooth sanded plywood that I'm gonna be using. This will also be used for the top of the seat as well, but I'm going to wait to cut that out because the support underneath the seat, the plywood was a slightly different thickness, so I want to make sure that once I have it installed that I can get a good measurement and get a nice clean cut for the seat. Cut the rear seat supports out, much like the front seat, trace them out and then cut them. The front portion of the rear seat support has these holes cut in it. This is where the rudder push rods pass through to get to the back of the boat. When I was taking apart the boat, I realized that just the angle where the rudder push rods travel through here and with the front seat, it was really hard to get them out and in. So instead of doing a hole here, I'm going to do a notch on the back. That way, when we take off the top of the seat, we can just lift those rudder push rods right out. Before we install the front seat support here, we have to fill in all those spots we ground out that were rotten. I'm going to be using Bondo brand fiberglass body filler to fill in most of this, but this large hole here, I need to put something else there, otherwise it's gonna be a weak point in the boat. So I've got this Bondo fiberglass repair kit. I just picked this up at our local hardware store. I'm going to use this to patch the hole, then when we go over the boat with the body filler, it'll have something to stick to there. This kit comes with some fiberglass mat, your resin, hardener, and a couple things to mix it. I cut out a piece of fiberglass cloth that will go over the hole here. So next, we need to mix up our resin and hardener. There's quite a few fumes that get put off by this, so make sure you're wearing a respirator. When mixing your resin, make sure you follow the directions on the box. There'll be specific ratio. You want to make sure you stick to this, otherwise your resin could set too quickly, set too slow, or just not set at all. Mix your resin really well, get that catalyst evenly throughout the entire resin. To start, wet down all the edges that you'll be applying your fiberglass to. This will just give the fiberglass mat something to stick to. Next, place your fiberglass mat over the hole and wet it down entirely with the resin. Make sure you wet down your fiberglass entirely and the fiberglass mat is tucked into all the corners. The resin cured up really nice. It's nice and hard. This patch turned out really nice. I'll probably have to clean up some of these puddles of resin here at the bottom since we are going to be putting our seat support here, so we need to make sure that's nice and flat. Next, we'll be using this Bondo hair fiberglass body filler to fill in some of these gaps here, get these nice and flush. The other tools that you'll need for this is something to mix on. I've just got a mixing board here. These are like $2. You could also use a piece of cardboard, something like that. You need a spatula just to apply the Bondo and mix it. And then you want to make sure that you have some paper towel handy. This stuff sets in 4, 5, 6 minutes, something like that. So you want to make sure you have a paper towel just to clean off your tools quickly, otherwise it just turns into a mess. Do the Bondo fiberglass, I started with small batches. So I used about a golf ball sized batch at a time. The box recommends using 1.25 inches of hardener with that size. From there, I mixed it up. It's a little tricky with all the fiberglass hairs, it all sticks together, but you want to try and do your best to get a nice even mixture. Once that's done, you use your scraper to pack the Bondo into all the little crevices. As you're applying the Bondo, you really want to use some decent pressure just to make sure that there's good adhesion between the Bondo and the rest of the wood. With all the fiberglass hairs, it's a little difficult to get a nice even coat, so we're gonna come back later and sand it out, so don't worry too much if there's some high and low spots. The Bondo's all cured and it's nice and hard. It filled the gap really nice. It's pretty rough at the moment, but we're gonna be covering this over with the seat support, so I'm not too worried about how it looks. On the other side, the hole that we filled looks fairly rough, but we're gonna finish that off when we go to paint the boat and do our finishing work for that. Got the Bondo all sanded down now, so now we're gonna start installing the seats. I'm gonna use this PL 400. This will just ensure we have a really nice tight bond on all those seat structures. I started with gluing and clamping the seat backrests onto the supports in the boat. Next, I glued and screwed in the side supports onto the side of the boat. After that, I installed the front of the seat support. This gave me a nice flat surface to work with so I could find the center and install the center seat support. The seat turned out really nice. It looks just like the original, nice and flat. So now we're gonna move on to the back seat. I've got all the seat supports just set in here now. The tricky part is this rear portion of the seat, it's the front wall of the paddle wheel well, is really thin chipboard. It had rotted away a little bit and all the screws had pulled through, so it was sagging into the paddle wheel well. I just have it lightly tacked right now. I'm gonna use it as a bit of a guide so I can figure out where these seat supports should go. And then afterwards we'll go from the paddle wheel side and secure it back, maybe add a little bracing in here just to really make sure that this is all firmed up again. The last structural piece we need to install is this piece right here. So this will slide right in here, and this acts as a support for the rudder pedal to mount to. I've got a line marked here where I'm going to start gluing. To make sure this glues well, I'm just gonna take this heavy toolbox and slide it in here. Make sure it's pushing down nice and tight onto this panel. So after we're done installing all these pieces, we're gonna come in from the bottom side and just put some screws in, make sure everything is nicely secured. So now we just have to cut out the top of the seats. So I'm using this 3/8 inch sanded plywood, so this should give it a really nice clean look. Well, the seats are all in and they look fantastic. The sanded plywood I use for the seat tops give it a really nice clean finished look, should be really comfortable to sit on. And the 3/4 inch plywood I use for the structure makes it really firm underneath, using a little bit of glue as well as screws to hold everything together. Everything's very sturdy, there's no movement whatsoever. I added some extra bracing to the rear seat. This just gives the front of the paddle wheel well something to attach to. Since the front of the paddle wheel well is the backrest for the rear seat, I really wanted to make sure that was attached nice so there wasn't any movement or it would break while you're using it. In the next video, we're going to be getting this boat prepped for paint. So we're gonna finish drilling any holes that we need to, patching any screw holes, scuffs, or dings in the boat, and then sand this whole thing down so we can get to paint. I've got a really cool idea for the paint cover that I think you're gonna like. So thanks for joining us again on this portion of our vintage boat restoration, and we hope to see you again next time. If you have any questions, please comment below, and remember to like and subscribe.